Welcome to the InfoWars Nightly News. It is Tuesday, November 17th, 2015, and I'm Leanne McAdoo. Here's what's coming up tonight.
Tonight, the United States is expected to welcome the next tidal wave of refugees from Syria, as Barack Obama promises to increase the number of Syrian migrants to a staggering 100,000 per year. Meanwhile, a close the borders movement is sweeping the nation as tremendous backlash grows against Obama's migrant resettlement plan. So far, 21 U.S. states have announced that they will flat out refuse to accept the refugees.
As governor of the state of Texas, I will not roll the dice and take the risk on allowing a few refugees in, simply to expose Texans to that danger.
All that plus much more up next on the InfoWars Nightly News.
I'm racist for criticizing the religion of Islam, but they've got segregation in these Muslim no-go ghettos.
Clean, pure drinking water. You can't survive without it. But where do you get it? Alexa Pure Pro is a brand new, groundbreaking, gravity-fed water filtration system that is like no other. The Alexa Pure Pro transforms water from virtually any fresh source into clean, healthy drinking water, pairing the unprecedented superfiltration power of an all-new gravity block core with a hybrid chromatic shell. It removes up to 99.999% of impurities, including bacteria, viruses, fluoride, disinfectants, volatile organic contaminants, and hormones. Filter capacity up to 5,000 gallons. Stainless steel construction, easy assembly, low maintenance. Replacement filters are simple to install. And now, as part of an exclusive limited time introductory offer, you can save $20 off the retail price and get free shipping. This is a limited time offer, so order your unit today and receive free shipping and $20 off. Go to InfoWarsStore.com or call 888-253-3139.
Well, after the Paris attacks, the debate has quickly shifted from what are we going to do about ISIS to how many refugees can we bring in, regardless of the fact that jihadists might be embedding themselves within those refugees. Now, the number 10,000 refugees a year is being thrown around, even though the president has already publicly declared that the number of refugees from Syria and elsewhere will be increased to 100,000 per year by 2017. Now, this was something that he tweeted out in September. Obviously, it's an absolutely massive number, and it is inevitable that some jihadists will slip through this vetting process. Now, you would think that what happened in France would actually cause the president to question this move and, perhaps maybe reassess this strategy, but instead they're actually doubling down on it. At the G20 summit, Obama lectured his fellow world leaders on the need to take in more Syrian refugees. Now, of course, he would have us believe that all of these refugees are highly vetted, that there is little danger of any terrorists being imported into this country as refugees. But Representative Peter King says that is 1,000% not true. He says he's very concerned about this because we cannot vet the refugees from Syria.
Yeah, I am extremely concerned because what the president is telling us is not true. We cannot vet the refugees from Syria. There are no databases to work against. There are no government records. And when I talk to people involved in the vetting, they have no confidence at all in the people that are being allowed in. There's no way, people talk about thorough vetting. There is no vetting as a practical matter.
Now, King went on to say that the difference between taking in refugees from a place like Bosnia versus Syria is the fact that when you're accepting refugees from Syria, you're dealing with an organization that is directly involved with terrorist activity. He also went on to explain that there's absolutely no database to vet whether or not what these refugees are saying is true. They could tell you their name is John Jones, and you just have to take them on their word. And he also pointed out that even women have joined ISIS. And now we do know that ISIS has the capacity and the will to hide terrorists among the refugees that are fleeing the Middle East and flooding Europe. Now, joining me in studio is David Knight. Now, David, obviously in response to Obama's migrant resettlement plan, there's been a lot of uproar and a massive closed borders movement is taking place all across the country. People have been flooding the phone lines there in Washington, D.C. They've also been flooding social media, telling people to, call their congressional representatives, stop this resettlement of Middle Eastern migrants. And it must be working because now we have 21 U.S. states announcing that they're refusing to accept Syrian refugees, one of which, of course, now includes Louisiana, which we just learned last week. They had just begun accepting Syrian refugees. And then guess what? One of them went missing, and the missing refugee turned up out of state. And the charity organization that was, helping these refugees resettle them, they said, well, it's not our job to keep track of them. And the governor, the federal agents there, they didn't even learn about this missing refugee from the Obama administration. They learned about it through the media. And so, of course, in response, Governor Bobby Jindal issued an executive order preventing resettlement of Syrian refugees in the state of Louisiana. So, it doesn't matter if these states say we're not going to accept them. They can, once they're inside the United States, they can easily move about.
True. But we need to look at the most effective way to shut this thing down. And I think it's very important that as this began yesterday, went very rapidly from 6 to 21. Now it's over 25 states. Two of the states that were added yesterday evening, Leanne, were Massachusetts and Maine. This isn't something that's just Democrats. And this is a massive pushback. It is a legal way to do this. There's been some pushback from some of the media saying they don't have the legal right to do that. No, it is Obama who doesn't have the legal right to do what he's doing, opening up our borders and bringing people in. Let's take a look at something that happened 217 years ago. Just as the governors were pushing back against the federal overreach here, let's pull something out of the history bin, and it's not just dusty history. This has application to today. Now, 217 years ago in July, there were the Alien and Sedition Acts that the John Adams administration put in. That was a response to the French Revolution and an undeclared naval war with France. So this is put out there as measures of security. Where have we heard this before? Okay, well, what were they? Well, first of all, the Alien Act is kind of interesting because it's exactly the opposite of what this president is trying to do. They would give the president the authority to declare foreign residents to be enemies of the state and to jail or deport them. We have our president does just exactly the opposite. He takes enemies of the state, he brings them in, and he imports them in. But in both of these cases, what this was really about was rigging the system for people who supported your political party. Adams wanted to get rid of certain number of people certain kinds of people because they would not vote for his party. Obama wants to bring them in because he thinks they will, but also he has other issues going on with this. And then there was the Sedition Act. There have been numerous times in the history of America where presidents have decided that they are going to criminalize any dissent. Okay, the most recent edition of this was in 1917, the Espionage Act. And we have seen the Obama administration go after more people, reporters, whistleblowers, so forth, under the Espionage Act than all of the previous presidents combined. As a matter of fact, more than 3 times all the previous presidents combined. But right after it was passed in 1917, and of course it was put through by the Woodrow Wilson administration, it was done in response to the impending involvement in World War I. One of the first people to be prosecuted under the Espionage Act was a film director who did a film about the American Revolution. And in it, he showed the British to be very bad guys, probably exaggerated the case. But Woodrow Wilson didn't like that because he was going to be using the British as allies. So he fined this guy $5,000 in 1917 dollars. That's a huge fine, and put him in jail for 10 years. Wow. And the Supreme Court said, there is no First Amendment protection of movies. And the Supreme Court said, that's our opinion, and we're going to stick with it, and they did until the 1950s. In the 1950s, they said, okay, now we've decided that the First Amendment applies to movies. Now, that illustrates why we cannot appeal to Washington to do the right thing, to do the lawful thing, to do the constitutional thing. And Jefferson knew this at the very beginning. So when these Alien and Sedition Acts were passed in July, about 4 months later, 217 years ago yesterday, he secretly wrote and worked with his neighbor Madison to set up the Kentucky resolution, also Virginia resolutions, to establish the idea that it is the states that have the final say-so on this. And the immediate situation in Jefferson's case, as is pointed out by a New American article that you see right there on the screen, in Jefferson's case, he had his own congressional representative right there in his district who wrote a letter critical of the John Adams administration, and a grand jury there indicted him for libel. They were going to put him in jail. Jefferson wrote letters to the Virginia legislature and said, I want you to punish the grand jury. I mean, this is a guy who doesn't take prisoners, okay? He's an activist. Punish the grand jury for indicting this guy because we have a First Amendment that protects his speech. Well, he was cautioned by James Monroe, another president later on, who also was a neighbor of his, and he said, no, you should take this up with Congress. Jefferson said no. And this is what he said. It's of immense consequence that the state retain its complete authority as possible over its own citizens. The system of general government, in other words, the federal government, is to seize all doubtful ground. He knew that the feds, if anything was left ambiguous, they would take the power. Now, he went on to say in the Kentucky resolutions, which are done anonymously because he was fearful that he would be jailed and persecuted by John Adams. This is what it said, that the several states composing the United States of America are not united on the principle of unlimited submission to a general government. Do you get that? We are not united on the basis that we give up all of our power and all of our right to the federal government. That was what this country was founded on, and it was the American states who created the federal government. It would be the same as if we were to leave the United Nations, and the United Nations then said, you can't leave, and we're going to create an international army, and we're going to subjugate you. No, that's not what it was based on. He said that they have created a general government for special purposes, delegated to that government certain definite powers, and reserving to the state itself the residuary power. Well, of course, that's the 9th and 10th Amendment, as we see that. Okay, so he's repeating that again. And that was in the Constitution at that time. It was ratified in 1791. So he says, whenever the general government assumes undelegated powers, its acts are unauthoritative, void, and of no force. Okay, you don't have to appeal it to the federal government or to the Supreme Court. You just take it that way. And I think when we look at what's going on with medical marijuana, with recreational marijuana use, when you push back against federal authority that is overreaching, then the feds back off, just like they did Bundy Ranch, just like they did with Corbett and the TSA. They will do that with the states because they don't want people to understand that under our constitutional republic, the states have as much power as the federal government that they created, and the federal government is actually the smaller creature.
Right. Wow. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because we're seeing it now on social media. They're really kind of making this a moral conundrum. And they're saying, you know, obviously this is going to be a big thing now with this, when the GOP, the next debate and everything, it is going to be about prove your Christianity. There's the whole, they're tweeting out now about Matthew 25:35. When I was hungry, did you feed me? Did you give me something to drink? Did you clothe me? Did you give me shelter? And also pointing out, you know,
well, the Bible was putting up rules for individuals and how we deal with people one-to-one. It wasn't creating a constitution for government in the first place. So that is not, we have, one of the reasons that we're in the situation we are morally in this country is because the churches, especially the liberal churches, have abdicated their personal responsibility to the government. The government is not there as an institution of charity. It is an instrument of force, and we need to be very careful, like Washington said, it's like a fire. You don't want it to get out of control. Right, and that's what I think is so important, because when you take these moral arguments and then a lot what we're seeing on social media is sort of throwing the Bible verses back at people that are trying to say, we can't do this, this is not safe. They're saying, well, what would you have done with the Jews when they were fleeing Nazi Germany? Well, there again, we were not dealing with an organization that was dealing in terrorist activity, where we were thinking that there was going to be some possible jihadis in with the Jewish refugees, right? And so that's what it is people are turning this into sort of a moral debate when it really is about protecting the lives of the American people. And yes, you know, I would love to be able to say, come on in. I'm sorry that our governments have been destroying your life. Our government is destroying their life. But, you know, like I said, we can't bring that here. Well, David, thank you so much. And stick around, because we're going to have some more from the Alex Jones Show right after this.
I think this is the integration of the ultimate illuminist globalist plan for global war and global civil war. Civil war meaning in all nations that we're seeing, whether it's Europe, whether it's parts of Asia and the United States. We're being set up for the ultimate takedown of, obviously, borders, language, culture. The globalists have made their plans very clear. We're watching it right now. And I think what people have to ask the question on the whole French thing, you know, standard protocol in counterterrorism, you can talk to the experts, read about it, is the longer they wait, once people start being, the first shots are fired, the more danger it puts the hostages in. You've got to ask yourself, why did they not rush the building? Why did they allow it to go on even when people were texting and phoning out of the building? I think that this is the cause du jour. As you probably know, Alex, the French Foreign Legion now is boots on the ground in Syria. It's become